Go to TAPgiles.com to learn dreams, engage my services, and support the channel.
I'll show how this works. So this is discovery points. Someone was asking how to do this kind of in an efficient manner and stuff. So you've got objects, and these wouldn't be all like clumped together like this. They'd be like plants or creatures or something in the world. And the idea is you go towards one of them and then you can discover it. So it has this circle saying you can discover it, and then you press square and that discovers that one. So now the tan ones will be ignored because you've already discovered it. Or you could have like the tan ones have some different logic that runs and tells you what it is or something. But now just the green ones are there, and then if you press square on the green one, now they're all discovered, and it won't show you that prompt anymore. Yeah, and there's 2,000 of these blocks in the scene, and there's kind of two stages. If you look at the top left, you've got the complex checkers and the simple checkers, and if I hold triangle, you'll see where all of the checkers are. So the idea is, as you move around, the checker is emitted like next to the block, and it checks to see if it's discovered or not, and simplifies itself to a simple checker if it has been discovered. And as you move away from it, so like the ones in the distance, if you move away from those, then they disappear. So you get destroyed and save Thermo and stuff. But if I discover the tan ones, now only the... so these dots are actually the complex checkers it's showing. So now only the green ones have the complex checkers ready to be discovered. And then if I discover the green one, now none of them are complex. But as you move around, like new ones are being spawned anyway, and then it checks and simplifies itself if possible. And that's what kind of keeps it kind of cheap on Thermo and things. Have a quick look in analysis mode. So it kind of, the gameplay processing on the bottom right there goes up quite a bit when it's emitting stuff. But normally you wouldn't have 2,000 of these using up 46% at resting. You'd probably have like maybe 20 or 50 in a scene, depends on how you use it, but yeah. So, but if I like discover the green and the tan, now it doesn't go quite so high, sort of. It like goes down quicker because it simplifies them quicker. And also if I go into, let's bring up the thermometer and then just play. There you go. So you can see all these objects being emitted and unemitting, despawning. And if you look at the Thermo, so when I go into the middle, then it goes up by about 3%. And as I move around, it kind of hovers around that. And if I discover one of them, then it goes quite a bit cheaper. If I discover the other one, cheaper still. And now that went down 1%. So when I go in and it's completely surrounded, it's still only 1% of Thermo used for all the stuff going on.
This tutorial assumes you've already learned how to make logic pop up when the player is nearby, so I'd highly recommend watching that tutorial before continuing this one. Check the card or the description for a link.
So now we want to actually, so that's kind of the basic setup of how to have this emitting and de-emitting stuff, spawning and despawning. So what do we actually want to do in here though? We want to do some other stuff. So we want to display that circle. So an empty circle is UI subsphere. So just make that large in the center. And yeah, I think that'll do. And we only want to display that if this is the closest one to the character, because otherwise you could press the square button to discover like all of them around you. So we want to make sure it's only the closest one. So I'll just put this up here, make a copy of it, and then give this a different name of closest, and power this circle in the center. So now we need to tell this tag when it's the closest one to the player. And I'm just going to like move that down a bit. There we go. And that's in the center of the cube. So in here, we're going to use a trick using a follower. Yeah, a follower will kind of drag the object around. So if we put closest, then it's being dragged to the closest tag of that name, closest to the center of that object, the kind of dot there. So if I move that dot over there like that, then it's adjusting to like drag that to the closest of these tags. But if we don't want the character to move, then we can turn these down to 0, and now it will still look for the closest tag to use. It won't actually affect the character in any way. It won't be dragging it around or anything. So now this will send a tag output while it is the closest one to one of these followers. And we can actually set the distance to something lower. So this is kind of the range that it will be considered close enough to activate this tag. So now only the closest tag will actually be activated and power that extra text box. And next we want to tell it to be able to discover or not. So if it's the closest and we press the square button in this case, then we want it to do something. So if we grab that and give us another name, like discover, and then we want that to send a signal when we tap square. So I'm going to use a trigger zone, and we'll have that scene wide, so it doesn't matter where the character is, it will just detect it. And that's also a little bit better for performance. And we want it to detect the tag called discover. So I'm using up and down on the D-pad to get the discover tag. And we want to power that, we kind of want to flicker it on with a pulse. So if we put square into this signal manipulator, we can say pulse on input on. So that means when we go from not pressing square to pressing square, it will send a brief signal, and that will power the zone and tell this tag that it should do the discovery action. But we only want it to pay attention to that if it's the closest, so we'll just power that while it's the closest. And I think for now I'll just like change the color of this, or make it glow like that while it's discovering. Yeah. So if I press square, it kind of flashes. If I make that kind of have a fall off, it might be clearer. Yeah, so it kind of pulses it on like that. And we want that to actually do something. So we're going to store which of these block types, or these would be like plants or animals or something. We want to store which of those have been discovered already in a gadget, in a variable. So let's add a variable. And this is how you can kind of store data for if the player leaves the game and comes back to it, or goes from this scene to a different scene. You can turn on persist in dream, and now this variable will be saved and like remembered next time you come back to it. So we'll call this tan discovered. This is the tan blocks, and when we discover it, we will use a variable modifier to set tan discovered. So we want to set it to 1 because it is discovered, and if it's 0, then it's not discovered yet. Cool. So let's just put a number displayer in here so that I know if it's discovered or not. So it starts off at 0, so we're not discovered, and then I press square, and now it is. But now we want to kind of simplify this checker block to something very simple, so it uses as little thermo as possible. So if it's already discovered, we don't need any of that stuff to work because we'll never need to make it discovered again. We only need to pay attention to this to destroy the group entirely when it should despawn. So if we just stick that into a chip, yeah, if we have that there, that's like the block exists at all. If we have a keyframe in here, this is like the complex version. So if we just change its color, maybe, that'll do. And make sure that's powered on. So while this chip exists, then that dot will be like a teal color. But we will destroy this chip when it gets discovered. So we get that. Let's destroy, and now I can destroy just that chip alone, like that, and it kind of goes into the side of the window. But you can see this little nub going into the side of the chip itself. That's because the destroyer is linked to it. So we want to power that when it gets discovered, but also if it's already discovered, because it was discovered before, but then you come back to a similar block, then you want to destroy this chip right away. So if we go like that and use get, then this will send out the value. So if it's 1, we want to destroy that chip anyway. So cool, let's try that. Okay, so they're all blue because it's not discovered yet, and if I press square, then they all become white and won't have that extra thermo in them. So to optimize, you can have this smaller, or you can have it larger to like allow further away things to be discovered. So cool, now we have a big field like that, and then square will make them white. So if I actually look at the thermometer and use test mode, then we can look at the thermo on the bottom left. So it's adding 2% for that amount of those checkers being spawned. But if we then discover, then it goes down by 3%. I don't know how that works. Something's going on. But it saves a load of thermo. So now if we go out of the whole thing and then back in, we can see how much a full patch of that is worth on the thermo. And now it's just 1% instead of 3%. In fact, you can change this to, instead of just destroying this chip, you could destroy the whole thing. So if I just do that. So you could destroy the whole checker thing instead of just that chip when we're discovered. So link it to that. And it works the same. So if I hold show checkers, it still all works fine. But now the simple checkers are completely super simple because they just don't exist. And we just need to make sure the spawner thing is only on once mode. So if it starts it may flicker and freak out a bit otherwise. Yeah, so show checkers, and I'll discover the tan one,
and that's still working fine, and then discover the green one, and that's still working fine. So now it's creating these checkers, but it's completely destroying them because it's already been discovered. So that will save even more thermo and performance and whatnot. Yeah, so now let's make a second one of these so that we have two different types that we can discover and run around with, just to make sure that works. So I'm going to change how this grid is made first, which will just make it easier a bit later. So I'm going to copy that out, put that over there, delete that, and I'm going to omit these original blocks. So normally you'd probably have this block be an element by itself, and then you import it in here, and when you want to make changes, you'd edit the original element creation, and then come back in here and go to update mode, and then click on update, which will be one of these buttons. But for like testing and stuff, I tend to just use an emitter, or lots of emitters, to emit lots of copies of that, and then I can still go here and edit this once and change its properties or whatever. So if I just put this down here, and I want to emit that, and I want it to emit in the same spot as the emitter. No speed once. Yep. And then I can copy this along. Move it up. And now when I play time, it emits lots of those blocks in that grid. And then just to save a little on Thermo, because this could get quite expensive, I'm going to add just a painting into this group like that, and I'm going to turn off the painting. You don't need to see it in play mode, but that lets me add a destroyer, and then if I come out of the group and then use affected objects to apply to that group, so now it will emit the stuff and destroy the group. So then all the emitters are removed from the Thermo, because there's going to be quite a lot. So that's cool. And just to prove that it's still working, that all still works the same. Oh, and one thing you'll probably notice is right at the edges, even when discovered, right at the edges, you see it going blue and then turning white. That's because it starts off with the full complex version, and then it simplifies itself. So you'll still see that kind of flicker. You don't actually want a full grid of just this one type. You want to have two different types that talk to each other. So let's copy that like that. Make this a different color. And make this a different color. And then you want to emit that version. And we want to check a different variable. So let's have another variable here for the green discovered, like that. And then these should check green discovered. And that should be all fine. So cool. So now we'll want to emit that around the place, and it's actually been turned off. Turn that on again. I'm going to just have two emitters that are alternating. So this one will emit the green block like that. And then I can copy those. And then move it back and over one, and move that along there. So this is kind of like a checkerboard pattern, and then I can copy all those. And now I play, and now they're referencing the different blocks, so they have this alternating checkerboard pattern, and it should all just work exactly the same. So
discover the green one, and the bottom one becomes 1 on the left hand side. And if I discover the red one, now they're both 1, and all the dots are white. So that's cool. And I think that's about it. So if you wanted to, instead of destroying this stuff, you might destroy just the discover stuff and keep this one around to have a different display, like this is a green block or this is a red block when you're close to it. So I guess I could just do that over here. So we need that one and that one. And yeah, that'll destroy that. So if I put this saying green, because we've already discovered it, maybe we'll make the opacity 0. You can do this in a number of ways. I'll just do it this way for now. Right, so it's not showing, and then you discover the tan version, and now it's saying it's a tan version, yay! And then the green one, and now it's saying green, yay! Yeah, so just have that working however you want. And now there's 1,000 of them. It's still only 25% or 33%, which is pretty good considering there's 1,000 of them. Like 1,000 of anything with logic on is pretty tough to do. But yeah, if we run around with it, but it's still only adding a few percent for this little cluster of pop-up things. Cool.
Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something interesting. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to learn something new every day.